Hi there, and welcome to an extra episode of my writing advice and inspiration podcast, OMAKASE. I am your host Max, also known as M. Kieran. If you hear that little sound in the background, that is the sounds of my chinchillas playing. They are very silly girls, and I mistakenly decided to start recording right now when they are the most active. You may be wondering, Max, why an extra episode of the podcast? It's been a little while. And what exactly will we be talking about today? Well, I wanted a shorter-ish episode to talk about the way in which first drafts come to an end. If you have been following the most recent episodes, you know that I have been feeling that feeling. I am certain I can see the end of the story, and with every writing session, I draw closer. One of these days, soon, I will sit down to write, and when I'm done, the novel, too, will be done. In truth, it will only be the first draft of the story, but nonetheless a meaningful part of the process. Today I want to talk about my experiences so far, and I want to offer plenty of advice and inspiration to anyone out there writing the first draft of their novel. I have some very, very meaningful pieces of advice, things that you should keep in mind when writing, the kind of things that have kept me moving, even though a part of me wanted nothing but to stop. And also, more general advice to get you to just keep writing, even when you feel doubts, when you're unsure, or when you get that nasty little feeling that you're gonna have to fix the writing you have put on paper just now, and that more work lies ahead. We have a bit to talk about. But first, I want to let you know that in the description of this podcast and or video, there should be a bunch of handy links, such as the song that you hear at the beginning and at the end of the show, ways to support me, the email you can send questions to, and more. Okay. With that out of the way, let's begin the conversation with an explanation. Why an extra episode of the podcast? If anything, really, this is just a longer format version of my weekly update. And it's weird. If you know about the Patron stuff, you know that I have been focusing more on writing. And this past week, I have gotten so much writing done. I've been writing for quite a bit. I'm back to writing outside of the house, mostly because I wanted a change of scenery. And these last few days, I've just been writing back to back to back to back to back. And yesterday, when the session finished, I had just begun writing the beginning of the end. The way that I'm picturing the story, that I believe that the scene that I'm currently on right now will go on probably for a couple of writing sessions. It's a big one. There's going to be a little bit of monologuing here and there. Don't really have a choice over that. The antagonist will decide how much monologue there's going to be in that story, not me. And then after that, a little bit of fallout, a little bit of tying up loose ends, and I know I'm gonna sit down and the writing session will finish, most likely early, and the book will be done. I don't know exactly when it will be finished, but it's coming. I can feel it. The pieces are falling into place. Threads that I set up in the story are coming into full bloom. The once barren field where the story began is now lush. Spring has returned, and countless flowers now stand in full colors. It feels good. It's also scary, and it's also hard. Someday, you will be here, and you will understand how weird it is to put down those final words and know within yourself that that is that. Every time it happens, I find myself searching, looking inside myself, as though looking into an empty apartment you once called home. All the furniture's gone. You've paid your last month of rent. The room's empty. The kitchen's empty. There's nothing left. You have packaged everything. You have left it devoid of anything. And just like that, your mind is empty too. There are no more words left to write. I remember this small little place that was part cafe, part restaurant, part deli, part tourist shop. The kind of place that, you have no idea how it's staying in business when it's doing 10,000 things at the same time. And I'm sitting in the back, and there's music playing, but I'm not paying attention to it, and people are moving on and about, and I'm in the little corner typing away, and then it was over. I looked at the sentence I'd just written, and I realized that was the final sentence. And I looked at it. I looked at it for like 15 minutes, thinking of what else to add. I searched inside myself for more. And I do admit that part of it was because I was so early into my writing session. I figured, well, I still have a little bit more time. I reread the chapter, which I never do. And when I came to the end, I knew that was it. That was all I had. And I know that I'm heading there again. And it's strange. Because you never know how close you are to the end until the last lap. You don't know until the last lap. And this novel is really close to being done. And these feelings that I've been feeling for this last week, ever since I recorded the last podcast, continue to grow stronger with every writing session. And I'm not trying to make it dramatic or melodramatic, but I was so exhausted yesterday when I came home. Part of it from thinking about all the things that are going to happen, all the things I need to do, the good writing things and the bad writing things, and I came home and I was so exhausted that I just laid down in bed, thinking about the story, not passing out, not falling asleep, not resting, not napping, just thinking. Thinking about it. It is an inverse. It is the full loop. It is going all the way back to the beginning when I would stay up thinking about what I would do when I finally began writing the story. And so I'm back to the beginning, being excited, delighted to find out what happens next. I want to know what the antagonist is going to say. I don't know exactly how things are going to end up. And telling by the way in which the story has advanced, I am certain that the original ending I had planned is not going to manifest. Or maybe it will? I don't know. The story has arrived at this point where the pieces I set in motion are on their own. Almost like a kid winding back little cars and letting them go. And they go until they can't no more. And the pieces, the characters, the events, they're all going. And the collision is happening now. This final chapter is the culmination of everything. And it's weird. It's weird to once again know that the story will be finished. If you are writing right now, take this as a sign that you can keep going. Especially if you're in the middle of things. Especially if you're thinking about beginning. Finishing a novel is both simple and incredibly hard. Technically speaking, all you need to do to finish a novel is start writing and keep writing until the novel is over. Technically speaking, it is very easy. All you need to do is keep doing that. And although I am labeling it as easy, I don't want it to undermine the reality here. If you sit down to write and you keep doing that, you will finish the novel. That right there is fact. The hard part, of course, is doing the writing itself. And that right there is the battle. The conflict we face when we combat the blank page. When we destroy it one word at a time. That's the hard part. The actual writing thing. But there is relief to be found. Because if you can keep doing it, and you keep doing it, the novel will be finished. That right there is not fantasy. That is not wishful thinking. That is just fact. And I know that I want to be careful with what I say, because I want this to be inspiring. If there was one thing I could pass to you, one thing to help you keep writing, it is unfortunately not anything I haven't said in the past, but if you're new, or if you want a reminder, here you go. It doesn't matter what your first draft looks like. It doesn't matter if you have typos. It doesn't matter if that scene has issues. It doesn't matter if you contradict something you said in the past, or if a revelation in the story causes you to have made a mistake retroactively in your world building. This is okay. This is what happens when you write a story. The outline is just that. A guide as to how maybe the story should progress. Sometimes it goes according to plan. Most of the time, though, it does not. This here is normal. do not fall for that really, really silly belief that good writers know what they're writing about all the time. And good writers don't make mistakes. And good writers finish the first draft and send it out to publishers because they need not look through it. That is silly, and it is lies. The first draft is in many ways the hardest part of the process, because you're gathering the foundation for the story, like gathering clay. It is merely that, the foundation. And I know that it can seem harsh to know that even though right now the first draft seems like the hardest thing, there's still more work ahead of you. And I don't want you to look at it as a bad thing. Because at the end of all this, I want to create the best stories that I can. And sometimes that means a lot of revision. And sometimes that means a lot of revision. And sending books out for feedback and then getting them back and having to revise the story again. This is normal. But you can't get there. You can't get to revising the novel and publishing it and sharing it with the world if you don't finish the first draft. Now, I know that I can keep saying this. Don't worry about the first draft. Don't worry about what it looks like. Leave the typos in. And I know that a portion of you believe me, because you've been listening to my content forever and you know how I do things. But a big portion of you is going, yeah, that's nice, Max, but I can't do that. And I want to give you further guidance. I made it sound so serious. Here's the thing, okay? Part of the reason I am the way that I am is because I have known writers who, the instant they realized they made a mistake and they found a problem with their timeline or their story, they would go back to the beginning and edit their story again. That's silly. That's silly. That's really silly. I want to use another harsher, stronger word, but I would rather not. That's endlessly silly, though. Revising your whole story every time something comes up? I'm not trying to make this really, really dark, but I'm just gonna come out and say it. That person just gave up on writing eventually. And I wonder if part of it was because they spent so much time wanting that first draft to be perfect. Which is silly. It really is. I'm going to give you an example of the kind of writing that I'm putting in this first draft, okay? In the scene right before the big conclusion, there was a moment in which the two main characters found themselves in a strange place. And in this strange place, the way that I originally imagined that at the beginning of the chapter was one way. And the way in which this room looked like changed description 3 different times throughout me writing that chapter over the course of 2 days. I want you to realize that, okay? As I was writing the story, I came in and I described the room the way that I thought it looked like. But then through the characters' actions and the implications of what had happened before, I realized a better description was fitting. So you know what I did? I made a note and I redescribed the room. And then more things happened. More things were said by the characters. And then I realized that I had thematically, throughout the story, brought up a particular thematic element, the idea of the color silver. And I realized that it made way more sense, thematically speaking, for the color silver to reappear right here, literally at the abyss between the past and the present, the future and the now, the place in which our character stands at this very moment and the person they want to become. The color silver needs to be here. So you know what I did? I wrote a note, and then I re-described the room once again. When I came into that chapter for the first time, I thought I knew what that room looked like. I thought I knew how things would go. But you don't know. We think we know, and sometimes we can be right. But I mean, sometimes lightning can strike the same place twice. I mean, that's just chances. Sometimes, if you've been writing for a long time, sometimes you nail a scene. Sometimes you don't. And sometimes halfway through you realize that you really should bring in the thematic elements that you introduced throughout the whole story. So I brought in the color silver. I brought it back. I realized that the bridge made more sense if it was made of silver instead of anything else, especially for the way that sequence was set up. Sometimes you realize, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're walking home after a writing session and you realize, well, you're not even trying to think of the story. You have a random pop song and a single word of a single lyric of a single verse in this pop song reminds you, oh, I should really establish this one thing before it happens in the story. And then you text yourself a reminder. I need you to look at your first draft not as an assignment you are turning in for someone. Because I do know that a lot of people look at writing with the intent of publishing their earlier versions on the internet. And if you want to do that, that's up to you. I don't recommend it. I've never liked it. I very much prefer having that privacy to be able to create something and then make it amazing. You guys will never, ever, ever read this first draft of this novel. You will never see the description for the room change twice before it finally settles on that silver bridge. You will never read that. And that feels great. It is amazingly good to know that I can put whatever I want in this first draft. Knowing that when the time comes, I will revise it, and it will become amazing, and it will become better. But I can't get there unless I write that first draft. You can't get there either. You have to finish it first. You have to keep writing. You have to put the bad writing in the first draft. And that's okay. If there is one central value to my writing advice videos that I've been making over the years is that I want you to write. The slogan for my show is "Today is a good day to write," because today is a good day to write. Every day is a good day to write. To sit down, to create, to give form to the formless thoughts in our minds, and to give shape to the shapeless characters that visit us in our imagination. To tell their stories, their adventures, their gambits, their successes, their failures. To see these other worlds. To experience. To see through their eyes. It is stories that make life so meaningful to me. So maybe I look at things differently. But I want to inspire you to keep writing. Put all of the bad writing in the first draft. If you're not sure what to write about, if you're not sure about a scene, if you don't know about a character, it's okay. Write a note for your future self and keep going. If you realize something changed after the fact, write a note and keep going. Or re-describe that room for the third time, that's okay too. Just keep writing. It's the only way you'll finish that novel. It's the only way novels get finished. Really. I know that I talked about this recently, but I'll bring it up again. And it's a nice little technical thing that you can do to make writing the first draft a little easier, especially on the eyes. I'm back to typing, and I know that if you've been listening to this podcast forever, or if you have been binge watching this podcast, you would know that I have come in and out of typing. I'm back to typing. I think that I'm finally feeling good enough to be typing full time. And One of the things that I recommend is that if you're typing on a computer and in a program that lets you select what font you want to use, I would like to inspire you to change that font to the ugliest and yet still readable font you have on your computer. Alternatively, go to a font website and download fonts that are ugly but still readable. Comic Sans is a really ugly font, but it makes for a fantastic tool to write with. I believe I was writing another novel before this one. I was writing it using Papyrus because that font is ugly. Or Bradley Hand is also a very good ugly font. You may be thinking, Max, that's silly. What could possibly be the benefit of writing with a particular font? And even more specifically so, a really, really ugly font like Comic Sans or Papyrus. That one is even uglier than Comic Sans. And I find it to be a reminder whenever I'm typing and I see that ugly, ugly font. It reminds me that this here is not set in stone. I used to type using the very bookish fonts. We're talking Garamond, Georgia, Courier, even though Courier is not really what you would see on a novel, but it feels novel-like. And I felt that looking at those fonts served as a reminder that this was going to be a real novel. This is going to be a finished work. And in a way, maybe it imparted a sense of pressure, to make it the best it could be right now, which is self-defeating. Please reference the story about that old writing friend who would go back and fix everything with every change. I don't even know if they finished that novel. The only thing I know is that they were not writing anymore. Writing with a silly font helps, because you look at it and you go, yeah, that's not finished. That right there is a first draft. I realize now after all this while that writing by hand, what helped me the most about writing by hand was seeing it as this rough shell from which the being that was my novel would someday hatch from. And that right there is probably the most important lesson that I can pass to you. If you're writing the first draft, if this is your first novel or your second one, and you're thinking to yourselves, how am I going to do this? Will this novel ever end? And that's a feeling that everyone has, especially if you're right in the middle or at the end of the first third of the novel. You see it as this endless journey, and you think to yourself, I'm going to be writing this novel for the next couple years. And before you know it, that feeling arrives. And you know, someday soon, the novel that has been a companion to you, the novel that has been a challenge to you, this friend that you have met, the characters in this world, the world itself, this window into a different place, soon it will shut. But someday soon as well, you will pick up the story, revisit that place, and make it the story it is truly meant to be. And so, welcome to a bonus episode of my writing advice and inspiration podcast, OMAKASE. The name's Max, also known as M. Kieran. If you really enjoyed this episode, please consider going to iTunes, leaving a rating and a review. My wife keeps reminding me that I have to tell you about it, because it is, and she's right, it is the only way this show will keep growing, and it will keep reaching and finding new listeners. So please, I beg you, if you really enjoyed this show, consider leaving a rating and or a review on iTunes. Additional to that, if you want to support me and what I do, the number one place to do so is ko-fi.com/mkaren. That is ko-fi.com/mkaren. You can go there and treat me to a cup of coffee. Alternatively, if you want access to the podcast early, you can support me through patreon.com/mkaren. I'm about to go into the shoutouts, but before I do that, I want to say a couple more things. First and foremost, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for spending a little bit of your day with me. I hope that I helped, that I managed to inspire you, spur you to keep on writing, but if anything, I hope that I was good company during your drive to work, the time when you walk your dog, the lonely evenings you spend at the library, or wherever else you listen to this podcast. I hope that you get up and get back to writing, and I know the words will find you. Okay? Okay. And now, you don't have to stay now. You can go. I am about to change gears and give a big shout out to every lovely person supporting me. First off with ko-fi.com, and then with the people from Patreon. I am also legally bound to not do any kind of edits, hence why you can actually hear me clicking on my mouse to arrange the posts and the things that I need to show you. Now let me see. Okay, the people who sent donations for the month of this month. Here we go. Okay. First and foremost, I would like to give a shout out to the people treating me to coffees. I've been doing this whole singing my answers recently. It particularly infuriates my wife. So, Lishadra, Angela, Kristen Lofton, Polly Craftual, and Vic. Thank you so much for your coffees, I really appreciate it. And the people supporting me through patreon.com/mkaren. Rival Moonlight, Somius, Lacey, Irina Phoenix. What if I just sang? Karen sings all of your names. A. Howard, Alyssa Dudley. I may or may not, I may or may not have seen a video by Brian David Gilbert where he sings the polka rap, but the perfect polka rap, and that has inspired me to be singing everything I say. I say that as like maybe that's what I did. I mean, but of course it's what I did. That's why I'm being silly today. But I love that I say that as though like that's like a thing that could have happened, even though I am clearly phrasing it as the only thing that justifies why I'm being so silly today. I'm also really tired today. Someone out there's gonna ask, and I don't know if I clarified it at the beginning of the video. It's been a little while since the video started, but part of the reason why I didn't want to do a full episode this week was because, one, I wanted to have a long conversation about this, and two, because I'm tired. I'm like so exhausted, and I only have enough energy in me right now for like this. I'm not kidding. I got home yesterday and I just laid in bed. I was so exhausted from writing. I'm thankfully gonna take a couple days off. I mean, this counts as one of the days off. And in a couple days from now, I'll be back to writing. My creative muscles are gonna be all refreshed, and I'll be ready to get back in there. Why is this web page freaking out? Why is there just a random comma? Patreon. Oh man, I was joking about how Patreon breaks every month, and then it broke this month twice already, and it's only the 10th of April. Anyhow, hey guys, how y'all doing? Who was I on? Alyssa Dudley, Heather is writing, Nicola, Brenda, Amelia, Pat Eidson, Melanie Ashford, Shido Tsubasa, Alex Kast, Alistair Baywood, Caitlin Blarg, Kameshwar Rao Shaluri, Kathy Lindsay, Lindsay, I do this every time, Kathy Lindsay, Kaylee, Mary Foster Smith, Juan Nunes, Raquel Fernandez, Sylvia Leitilla, Janosh Hebatsky, Sky D. White, Eleanor, Renee Solia, Connor, Jay Sawicki, Rhiannon August, Nicolay, J. Tonic Kirkwood, James, Arasos, Noam Sohar, Novels and Tomes, Kiel, Roa, Lier Kilo, I love you, Lier. Lier's so good. Clem Pastor, Nicole Grissom, Biting the Sun, Christiane, Shimmer Tales, Amanda Stevens, C.E. Richards, Zero Woods, K.M. Anderson, and last but by no means least, Alexo Hoshi. Hey guys, short episode today. I hope that it was helpful. I hope that I managed to inspire you to keep writing, to keep pushing, to finish that first draft, and see what lies beyond, okay? Writing a book is hard. Technically speaking, all you have to do is sit down every day and write. Of course, that's not how it is in real life. Some days are better than others. Sometimes you can only do so much. But the truth remains. If you keep writing, if you keep sitting down, putting pen to paper and fingers to keyboard, if you keep at it, you will one day soon, finish that novel. So remember, today is a good day to write.